Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel, and today we are introducing the WinWing TopGun MIP or main instrument panel to the channel, and in this video we are going to go over how to assemble it. Save you guys a bit of time if you guys decide to purchase your own, which I definitely recommend, so stick around. If you are interested in any of my tutorial guides for Microsoft Flight Simulator or simply interested in supporting the channel, consider joining me on Patreon. Patreon subscribers level tier 2 and above have access to all of my guides as well as any future guides that come down the road. Patreon link can be found in the description below. Alright, so a quick disclaimer guys, this video is under the impression that you have purchased the entire MIP. Okay, so the entire main instrument panel. This is the TopGun series, not the Legend. Now, a few things you're going to need is you're going to want, now all the tools actually come with it first off in order to assemble it, but I like to use my own. I use a 2.5mm Allen key with the T handle, just makes things a bit easier. So the first step is we're going to assemble the MFDs. We're going to put the MFD onto the screen displays. It's a real simple process. A lot of this is going to be sort of show and tell, really not a whole lot of talk on. So with all that in mind, just sort of pay attention to what we got going on here, and I'll make sure to point out some key points here. But we have a lot of really cool stuff. Oh, and don't forget your monster. You got to have your monster with it. Particular flavor was the strawberry one. Make sure that you guys keep that on hand at all times. Monster is critical. It's the elixir of life. So first, obviously, unsheathe the absolutely glorious displays. These displays are extremely gorgeous. Now, as we go through this, I'm going to be pointing out points that you're going to want to be aware of. For example, the USB port that actually powers the communicates with the PC, and then on the sides there are also USB ports, USB-C that power the display. The USB-C that's under it you don't need to worry about. That's for development purposes and troubleshooting. You should never have to worry about plugging anything into that. Now you can see that they have screws in both the MFDs as well as on the screens. You're going to take both of those out, and you're actually going to use those longer ones that are right underneath the MFD on the desk there. It's a very simple process the way they have this laid out, because all of the nuts that hold the screws in are inlaid into the plastic, so you don't have to worry about getting a second wrench to hold them in place. It's actually a really slick way to do this. The one thing I'll give you guys right off the bat as we start talking about this is some things to be aware of. Is this device takes 7 USB ports, so you're definitely going to want a powered USB hub. If you've got like a 15 or 20 port, then you're probably good as long as it has good wattage on it. For example, I use a 15 port 90 watt USB hub. Be also thinking about power draw from the wall, guys, as you guys, if you have a lot of USB hubs, that's something that you do need to be considering as well. The other thing to consider is with these, the displays are absolutely gorgeous, but they are a high gloss finish, which means they're going to be very reflective. You're going to pick up light sources from behind you. For me, that doesn't seem to be much of an issue as long as it's above, but depending on the angle that you set these at, and you can put them at almost any angle you want, they can get pretty dramatic with it. That's just something you're going to be considering. The build quality is fantastic. I think it's one of WinWing's best products that I've actually had the pleasure of using so far. The buttons all have a very nice membrane tactile feel. There are no soft touches, and what I mean by that is that you're not going to accidentally bump something and trigger something you don't mean to. Every button press is very deliberate, very intentional, but at the same time it's very smooth and very... It's one of those devices, and guys, you'll know what I'm talking about especially. It's one of those devices that you can just sit there and push the buttons and be completely happy, even if the sim isn't even on. I must have sat here for about 5 or 10 minutes just sitting here pushing buttons, and it's not even plugged into the PC yet, so to give you an idea. The overall design and layout is really, really slick. Something else to be considerate of as we get into this is the UFC, the upfront controller, going down to the MPCD. And there's the USB hub, USB port, by the way, on the back for if you were plugging in just the MFDs, but since we're using the display, obviously it's a different story. Anyway, digress. So the Other thing you want to think about when you're thinking about mounting these is that, so as I was saying, from the UFC down to the MPCD, that's all one unit, but the left and right MFDs are on two separate mounts. There's the glorious favorite part of all, removing the plastic coverings. I don't know what is so amusing about that, but it's like heaven when you get to do it. So anyway, as we pull that down, there we go. You want to make sure that, I thought the video was lagging on me for a second there. You want to make sure that you align them correctly. They do go vertically, and you want to make sure that you are orienting the buttons downward. The USB-C ports will plug in later on after we assemble the entire unit. So again, the assembly is super easy. I do recommend putting at least one screw in, getting it in there just so it holds it in place. Don't over tighten it. That's the other thing that I want to stress as we're getting into these. I see a lot of videos with these kind of plastic builds where people just crank the you-know-what out of it, and it's not necessary, guys. Please remember that you're not holding the Titanic down here. These are plastic. Even with the metal insets, you can pull those out or crack the plastic and then therefore crack the screen. So be careful. You need a slight tight and then maybe another eighth or quarter turn just to sort of lock it up. But you don't need to go crazy with tightening it, especially if it's something that's not going to be moving around, bouncing around, etc. But this is really easy. Just hold it with your thumb, screw it down on top. I keep all of them fairly loose until all four of them are secured. Just in case you need any kind of wiggle room or anything like that, maybe a thread isn't quite catching. It gives you the ability to sort of shift the MFD around on top of the screen if you need to, you know, a 32nd of an inch here and there. Obviously, if it's anything greater than that, you probably have a bigger problem, so you need to pull it apart and make sure that you have everything aligned. But the assembly process went very easy and very smooth. So we're going to go ahead and get all of those tightened up. All right, and so there's those final little quarter turns that we're adding to it, just making sure they're all tight once all four are in. Again, I can't stress enough, don't go too crazy with it, don't over tighten them, and then when you're all done, that's what you have. Rinse and repeat this process for the other two screens, and then we'll move on to the next step. All right, so now let's go ahead and attach the mount points to the MFDs. Don't worry about all that stuff on the left-hand side with the UFC. You guys are going to see how that was all done. Forgive the lighting. The clouds were playing havoc with me today. Anyway, don't worry about the stuff on the left. So pay attention to the angles and the points and the orientation. So the point that I just pointed out, that goes towards the top. You notice that you can see WinWing in the correct position on the back of the MFD. You can actually read it from left to right. So pay real close attention to the orientation. The three slots go towards the bottom. The other thing that I would recommend that I actually forgot to do is now would actually be a good time. It's not impossible. It doesn't create like some awful, horrible situation, but it would also be convenient to run your cabling now. So attach the USB cable at least to the MFD to the screen first, and then do these. But it's not the end of the world if you don't do it. So notice that you just take the number 4 screws. These are 4mm screws, and place them in the second spot from the bottom and the second spot from the top, orienting them as you see here in the video. And that's what's going to be crucial for us to set these in here in a minute. So the way that the desk clamp works, if you guys can see that there on the left on the UFC while I'm screwing that stuff in, is you're going to be able to mount multiple pieces to that. Now again, from there you also have the HUD display control unit underneath the UFC, and you guys can see here on the MFD, very simple. There's that USB cable I was talking about for the MFD. That one's easy to get to. The USB 3.0 is what's under that. So from here, before we get into this part, let me make sure to show you guys how to assemble the UFC. Okay, so the UFC, by the way, is gorgeous. This thing is my favorite piece. But again, this is another one of those ones that is very simple, just like you saw with the MFD. Very easy. Again, just pay attention to the orientation, because this part is going to be a little bit different. So we're going to be doing the opposite as we did with the MFDs. Notice that this time now the 3 slots are towards the top of the unit, with the larger angled side pointing down. That's going to be critical for attaching the desk mount or table mount, whichever you decide to use. So again, we're using the number 4 screws, but from here on out, very, very simple, straightforward process, not much to worry about. I will say that all of the buttons and the tactile feel, as I stated earlier, are absolutely fantastic, you guys. It is a really, really fun unit to just sit and hold. It sounds like I'm holding a baby, and it kind of felt that way. I have been super excited for this product. This is one of the many things that I've been wanting to show you guys, and it's just a matter of waiting for its turn, if you will, in the sequence of things we got going on here. One of the things that we're going to be doing here on the channel, as well as live streaming, is we're going to be rebooting the DCS World Tutorial Series, as well as bringing some combat back to live stream. But it's not just going to be combat. So for those of you who have no interest in the DCS World combat aspect, we're going to be doing air-to-air refueling, carrier traps, formation flying, all kinds of really cool stuff with this. And the F-18 Hornet, obviously, is where we're going to start. And hopefully we'll be able to pick up the Legend attachment for the F-16 Viper. So we'll be bringing that back as well. But I am looking forward to showing you guys a lot of the really cool stuff that you can do in DCS that doesn't require combat or blowing something up. It really is an extremely diverse experience. Or I should say dynamic. Well, dynamic and diverse. Anyway, and that's all you have to do for the UFC. All right, so next up is attaching the HUD controller. Now you guys can probably already see how this all comes together now with the two ends sticking out. You've only got the 2 screw holes. There isn't really a whole lot you got to worry about. It's very, very straightforward. Again, you're going to be using the number 4 screws, just like we did to attach the feet to the other units, both the MFD and the UFC. And we're just going to flip it over, screw that in, and everything it just sort of pops right into place. It's a very, very simple process. The one thing that I would advise caution, you don't want to push too hard on this. Remember, there are switches and buttons under there. It was actually one of those things that unfortunately I learned a lesson on. I didn't break anything, but I didn't think about it here. If I remember correctly the first time, I can't remember if I show it in this video or not. I'm kind of hoping that I do, just so you can see what I'm talking about. When you go to screw it in, don't push down too hard with the screw. Remember everything that's underneath this thing. And the reason why it's kind of tricky is because it's at an angle. It doesn't sit perfectly flush. It's designed to sort of rock forward, if you will, to make it easier for the pilot to interact with it, right? And you guys can probably already see some of that angle right there. So there, you can see that I learned my lesson here, because here I'm supporting it with my hand. So make sure that you support it with your hand, or put a towel or something under it if you're going to you know, set it down on your table. But just be very cautious of that. Make sure that you don't put too much pressure down on the unit itself. I accidentally bumped the record button, turned myself off. So what's happening there is also, what I'm getting at there is that it's kind of flexing inward, the stand is, so I sort of have to push it out with my fingers while keeping it up off the desk, and then it finally caught. But so right there, now what I'm doing right there is I'm grabbing it and lifting up off the desk a little bit. And there's that quarter turn I was talking about. And that's it for the HUD display unit. Very, very simple here. Okay, so this next part is pretty simple, but I want to make sure to include everything as possible, just in case there's any confusion. So the screws that have the plastic ring on them, those are for cable retention. You can route the cables through those to keep them out of the way. You want to attach the included SATA cable. Keep in mind the shape and design on the SATA cable, they only go one way, so if it's not going in, you probably have the cable upside down. But it should go exactly as you're about to see here. Again, they have a very clear shape. They have an L shape on the attachment, so it's pretty hard to miss it. If they don't go in, they're probably facing the wrong way, so don't try to force it. Then for the cable clamp, very, very easy. We'll obviously untie our USB cable, get that plugged in, and then the screw goes through the side of the mount brackets there, and then you can route your cable down. This is the only item that I put this on because, and you guys will see later, it really didn't make sense later on to worry about these, for me anyway. Plus, I'm going to do sort of a braided cable kind of thing later on once I get it fixed to the cockpit where I want it. So I'm not too concerned with it, but I do want to demonstrate how that cable management is done. So again, USB-C, USB 3.0 is what these are. And that's the other thing that I forgot to mention earlier. All of these are running USB 3.0. So that's going to be crucial in the aspect of making sure that you guys have enough USB 3.0 locations for it. But so in the back of the UFC, it's going to be USB-C. You plug that in. They are all labeled as well, by the way. So like, for example, it says USB to PC on it, on the MFDs. And then this one has only got the one USB slot. Now that hole that I was just pointing out with my finger, that's where you want to put your cable mount through. Just unthread the clip is the easiest way, or you can try to pinch it shut and just pull it off. But it's not actually threaded, but turning it, if you have difficulty getting that piece off, just turn it and it will pop off. But make sure that you have the flat side oriented correctly. That way you don't pinch it down and create unwanted tension on the cable. But again, very simple, very self-explanatory stuff here. But I just wanted to showcase it in case anyone has any confusion. I wanted to make sure to put as much detail in this video as I could for you guys. So again, goes into that bottom hole. Simply slide that through. Get your cable mount where you want, and you still have free reign of the cable, so you can move it if you want. The biggest thing that I'm about to show you guys here too, I think I demonstrated in the video, right there. Notice that the USB cable started to pull downward. Don't let it do that. So once you get to that point, sort of back the cable off a little bit and make sure that it has enough slack. Okay, you don't want it pulling down on that USB port. As more and more tension continues to create on that, what you could find yourself doing is essentially breaking the port. So if you have large hands like me, what I have found is sort of put the nut on the tip of the screw, hold it with the pad of your fingertip, and then just sort of start screwing your Allen wrench from the other side, just like that. And it works out pretty well. Now for this one, I sort of just pinched it with my finger. You guys can get a wrench, but again, a lot of the stuff you don't need it. But that's it. All right, so now it is time to assemble the desk mount. So we're going to be using those two holes there, one on the larger side and one on the inner. And then they just simply go into the two rails that are open on the mount. You're going to be using an 8mm socket. I do recommend getting a socket wrench. If you have a ratcheting wrench, that would be very helpful. Unfortunately, a socket wrench will not work. I'm sorry, I hope I didn't say a socket wrench, because can't use a socket wrench. Just a standard wrench. If you have a ratcheting one like what I have there, it would be very helpful for you, but it's not required. So again, first, the bottom rail is going to go through the variable slot, allowing it to rotate. It is kind of tricky. Now, as you go through these, the big thing to do is, again, sort of like we did in the beginning with the MFDs, don't over tighten them in the beginning, because you're going to want to adjust them later on to set the orientation so they all line up well. So remember, in this particular piece, you're going to have the UFC, you're going to have the HUD controller, and then on the lower side of this desk mount is going to be the MPCD, okay, or the multi-purpose color display. So remember, with the screws, you're going to go flat washer, then a lock washer, then the nut. The lock washer is going to be the washer that has a break in it. Okay, it's not going to be a full complete circle. It's going to be broken. It's going to be slightly offset from end to end. And the idea behind that is, as you tighten it down, it creates tension between the two pieces, preventing the nut from being able to spin freely through vibration and things like that. You know, if you're on a motion pit or if you have some sort of haptic feedback, it keeps it from being able to wiggle free. So it's not rocket science, but I will say that be patient. Take a couple of deep breaths if you have big hands like me. Maybe get some pliers, because I'm not going to lie, space gets really cramped in there very quickly. So again, here's what I was sort of talking about. You want to leave it free. Now you can get to these from the back side too, But then, so this one here goes into the center hole that is not variable, just the static hole that's on the mount itself. Get the other side in, and this is what it should look like, just like that. Okay, so again, make sure that you go washer, lock washer, nut on the inside, and there should be a washer between the hex head or the Allen head and the plastic unit itself. Get those all tightened up and you'll be good to go for this part. All right, and once you're all done, this is what you are left with. And so now let's talk about installing the MPCD. All right, so now it's time for the fun part. Now we get to install the MPCD. Okay, so again, you're using the exact same holes that you used on the previous mount or on the previous set to install the mount to the UFC. Pay attention to the notches in the MPCD because they drop right inside underneath the HUD controller there. And this is why you wanted to keep the mount semi-loose. You want to be able to move the mount. This is critical. Okay, if you can't move the mount, you're going to be forcing it in and you don't want to do that. Okay, so what I would recommend doing here is, I didn't quite do it like this in this video and I wish I had, but sort of pull the mount out is what I would do. Keep the mount on the MPCD screws a little loose as well. Then attach it to, like I said, the mount, then move it into place and then tighten everything back up at once. Again, I want you guys to be really, really careful here because again, you are at an angle. So don't push too hard if you have it laying flat. This is why I sort of have this down on its side. And I will admit this was very tricky and hard to do. And I think I ended up having to lay it flat anyway. So you're going to mount it the exact same way using the exact same holes that you used on the UFC. See, just like that, you can see how it sort of sagged down. So either be ready to brace it with your hands or put something soft under it where you're not going to damage anything. But the process of installation is the exact same. You're going to put everything where you want it. This is another one where I would also recommend putting your cables on now versus later. It's not, again, the end of the world. You guys can see that everything is there, but like you can see sort of how I ran that USB cable down the side, where I ended up just folding it down the middle of it later on, but it's really not, it's near the here nor there. It's not the end of the world. The left and right MFDs are the real big one that you want to make sure you plug them in before you mount them. By the way, this is a good time to tell you that I kind of goofed, and you guys will see this later. On the left and right MFDs, if you want it lined up as you saw in the beginning of the video, the actual mounts themselves, you're going to want to reverse them. Okay, meaning that the very tall side, you're going to want that at the bottom of your MFDs instead of at the top. Because of the way the desk mount is oriented, in order to get the MFDs up high enough, the mounting point has to be down lower on the MFDs. So again, on the left and right MFD, if you want them to set exactly as you guys saw in the beginning of the video, just to the left and right of the UFC, the mounting feet, you need to turn them around from what you are seeing here. And again, you'll see an example of that here in a little bit, but I did want to make sure to show you. So here's what I was talking about. You want to be able to move it. We'll get those last ones in. Let me get these screws in, then I'll show you guys what we're talking about here. Okay, so now we're just tightening these up. You guys will see how it all basically looks. Now, as far as the rotation portion, these are going to be pretty much at their max 90-degree position is where you're going to want them. Same thing with the MFDs. But you guys will see what it all looks like here in just a minute. Okay, and let's see what it looks like. And this is what you should have when it's all done. So again, we have the MPCD, the HUD controller, up to the UFC. So now a real quick demo on how to set up the MFDs and the mount, and you guys should be able to pick this up pretty quick from here out. Okay, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I don't want to bore you guys to death, but remember what I was talking about earlier about having to reverse the feet. So here is the top. This is in its true form. You can see the WinWing label. Now remember before we had the vertical part sitting up. This time we want to turn it around. Okay, you want the tallest part of the mount facing the bottom of the MFD. And this is how you're going to be able to attach the mount to the point where they are, where it's in the correct orientation so you can get them up high enough. Okay, so that's what you want to do with the feet that we were talking about. So the tallest part of the feet for the left and right MFD should be down at the lowest part of the display. And for the mount, it's exactly as you did before on both the MPCD and the UFC. Same two holes, same locations on the mount, same procedure. Okay, and again, these are going to be almost at a full 90-degree position, and then you'll be ready to mount them. All right, and there you have it, guys. So I really hope that this has helped you guys. I hope it saved a little bit of stress. Otherwise, you'd have to go through multiple PDFs and documentation in order to get this thing together. So I hope this saved you guys a bit of time. I'm super excited to show you guys this product in action. In the next video, we're going to actually see it in action. I'm going to show you guys how to set it up in the software, set up the display drivers, use the Sim App Pro software in order to populate the displays, or if necessary, how to manually set up the displays inside of DCS World. So stay tuned for that video. As always, guys, stay safe and healthy. See you in the next one.